The patrol car's red and blue lights sliced through the humid Alabama evening, painting the church parking lot in pulses of accusation. 17-year-old Kira Jackson stood frozen, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The officer's voice, sharp and unyielding, cut through the murmurs of the gathering crowd, "Hands where I can see them now." Kira's breath hitched. She was no stranger to the weight of eyes on her, the way her dark skin seemed to draw suspicion like a magnet in this small town of Willow Creek. But tonight, the air felt heavier, the stakes sharper, as if the world itself was holding its breath for what came next. She raised her hands slowly, her gaze locked on the officer, his name tag read T. Bennett, whose hand hovered near his holster. The church, a modest brick building with a crooked steeple, loomed behind her, its stained glass windows glowing faintly. This was supposed to be a sanctuary, not a battlefield. "Why were you here, kid?" Bennett's tone dripped with skepticism, his eyes narrowing as he scanned her faded jeans and hoodie. "Church closed an hour ago. You don't look like you belong." The word stung, each syllable a jab at the life Kira had fought to carve out. She wasn't just some kid. She was a straight-A student, a volunteer at this very church, and though no one in Willow Creek would believe it, an FBI trainee working undercover with Pastor Ezekiel Reed. At 17, she'd already seen more than most, her quick mind and unshakable resolve earning her a spot in a covert program targeting corruption in small-town police departments. But to Bennett, she was just another black teenager in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I'm here for Bible study," Kira said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Pastor Reed's expecting me." Bennett scoffed, stepping closer, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Pastor Reed, huh? You expect me to believe that? Empty your bag." Slowly. The crowd, churchgoers lingering after the evening service, began to murmur louder, their whispers a mix of worry and indignation. Kira felt their eyes, a mix of familiar faces and strangers, all watching the scene unfold like a storm-gathering force. She unzipped her backpack, revealing nothing but a notebook, a Bible, and her FBI-issued badge, which she kept hidden beneath the books. She wasn't ready to play that card, not yet. "Looks clean," Bennett muttered, but his posture didn't soften. "Still don't explain why you're skulking around after hours. You got ID?" Before Kira could answer, a deep voice cut through the tension like a blade. "She doesn't need to explain herself to you, officer." Pastor Ezekiel Reed emerged from the church's side door, his suit slightly rumpled but his presence commanding. At 45, he carried the weight of a man who'd spent decades fighting for his community, his dark eyes blazing with a quiet fury. "Kira's with me. Always has been." Bennett's jaw tightened, his hand still lingering near his gun. "Pastor, with all due respect, I'm doing my job. Got a call about a suspicious individual loitering. She fits the description." "Suspicious?" Ezekiel's voice rose, sharp and deliberate. "A black girl standing in a church parking lot. That's your suspect? Or is it just her skin that bothers you?" The crowd stirred, a ripple of agreement passing through them. Kira's chest tightened, caught between gratitude for Ezekiel's defense and the sinking realization that this moment was bigger than her. It was every moment like this, every stop, every stare, every assumption that had followed her and countless others through their lives. She wanted to scream, to tell Bennett exactly who she was, but her training held her back. "Stay calm. Stay sharp. Don't escalate." Bennett's face reddened, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Watch your tone, Pastor. I'm not the enemy here. I'm keeping this town safe." "Safe from what?" Ezekiel shot back, stepping closer, his hands open but his stance unyielding. "From a teenager who tutors kids in this church. From a girl who's been profiled her whole life because of people like you." The air crackled with tension, the crowd's murmurs growing into a chorus of dissent. A woman in a bright yellow dress called out, "Let her be, officer." A man near the edge of the lot clenched his fists, his face tight with anger. Kira's eyes darted between them, her mind racing. This was spiraling, and she knew how quickly things could go wrong. She'd seen it in her training body cam footage of stops gone bad, protests erupting into chaos. She couldn't let that happen here, not in her town, not to her people. Officer Bennett, Kira said, her voice cutting through the noise, calm but firm. I have ID. And I have something else you need to see. She reached into her bag, moving deliberately to avoid alarming him, and pulled out the slim leather case that held her badge. The crowd fell silent, the air thick with anticipation as she flipped it open, the FBI seal catching the light. Bennett's eyes widened, his mouth parting slightly as he processed the sight. What this some kind of joke, he stammered, his confidence faltering. No joke, Kira said, her voice steady now, her fear giving way to resolve. I'm working with Pastor Reed on an investigation. FBI. You might want to check with your chief before you make this any worse. Ezekiel stepped beside her, his expression a mix of pride and defiance. She's my partner, officer. And you just stepped into something bigger than you realize. Bennett's face twisted, a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. He grabbed his radio, muttering something about verifying her credentials, but the crowd wasn't waiting for his confirmation. Cheers erupted, a wave of relief and triumph washing over the lot. Kira felt a lump in her throat, not from fear now, but from the weight of their support. These were her neighbors, her family, her community, people who'd known her since she was a kid, who'd seen her grow into someone they could rally behind. But the victory was short-lived. Bennett's radio crackled, and a voice came through, clipped and urgent. Officer Bennett, stand down. Chief's orders. She's legit. He lowered the radio, his face a mask of resentment, but he stepped back, his hands dropping to his sides. This isn't over, he muttered, his eyes locked on Kira. You think that badge makes you untouchable? Watch yourself. Kira held his gaze, unflinching. I always do. As Bennett retreated to his cruiser, the crowd surged forward, surrounding Kira and Ezekiel with hugs and words of encouragement. But Kira's mind was already racing ahead. This wasn't just about her. Bennett's stop was no random cowlet, was a symptom of something deeper, something her investigation with Ezekiel was meant to uncover. For months, they'd been tracking reports of racial profiling in Willow Creek's police department, gathering evidence of stops, arrests, and harassment that disproportionately targeted black residents. Kira's role was to blend in, to be the eyes and ears in places the FBI couldn't reach. Tonight had been a test, and she'd passed, but at a cost. Ezekiel placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. You okay, kid? She nodded, but her eyes were distant. He didn't stop me by chance, Pastor. Someone tipped him off. They know we're digging. Ezekiel's face hardened. Then we're getting close. Too close for them to ignore us. The night air grew cooler, the crowd dispersing as the patrol car's lights faded into the distance. Kira clutched her badge, its weight a reminder of the responsibility she carried. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every kid who'd ever been stopped, every person who'd felt the sting of suspicion for no reason other than their skin. And she wasn't alone. The next morning, Kira sat in the church's cramped office, a single bulb flickering overhead as she and Ezekiel pored over their files. The desk was cluttered with notes, photos, and audio recordings, evidence they'd painstakingly collected over months. Ezekiel leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. Bennett's not the mastermind, he said. He's a pawn. Someone higher up is pulling the strings. Kira nodded, her eyes scanning a report of a recent stop, another black teenager, this one arrested for resisting after questioning why he'd been pulled over. The pattern's clear, she said. But we need more than patterns. We need proof. Something undeniable. Ezekiel's gaze softened, a rare moment of vulnerability breaking through his usual stoicism. You sure you're ready for this, Kira? You're 17. This kind of war kit takes a toll. She met his eyes, her jaw set. "I was born ready, Pastor. This is my town, too. I'm not letting them win." He smiled, a flicker of pride cutting through his worry. "Then let's get to work." Their next move was risky, a sting operation to catch the department in the act. Kira would pose as a decoy, walking through a targeted neighborhood known for frequent stops, while Ezekiel and a small team of volunteers recorded from a distance. The plan was simple but dangerous: provoke a reaction, document it, and use it to force the chief to act. If they could prove the department was systematically targeting black residents, they could escalate the case to federal authorities. The night of the sting was moonless, the streets of Willow Creek quiet except for the hum of cicadas. Kira walked alone, her hoodie up, her phone tucked in her pocket with the recorder running. Her heart raced, but she kept her pace steady, her eyes scanning the shadows. She knew the risks, knew what happened when tempers flared, when power felt threatened. But she also knew what was at stake: justice, not just for her, but for everyone who'd been silenced. A patrol car rounded the corner, its headlights pinning her like a spotlight. Kira's breath caught, but she kept walking, her hands visible, her posture calm. The car slowed, and she heard the crackle of a radio. It was happening. "Stop right there," a voice called, not Bennett's, but another officer's, younger, with an edge of eagerness. Kira turned slowly, her hands raised, her eyes locking on the officer as he stepped out of the car. His name tag read, J. Carter. "What's the problem, officer?" she asked, her voice even. "You're out late," Carter said, his hand resting on his belt. "Got any ID?" Kira's mind raced. This was the moment. She could feel Ezekiel's team watching from the shadows, their cameras rolling. She just needed to keep Carter talking, to let his biases slip. "I'm just walking home," she said. "Is that a crime?" Carter's eyes narrowed, his posture shifting. "Don't get smart with me. We've had reports of theft in this area. You fit the description." There it was, the same vague excuse, the same assumption. Kira's anger flared, but she kept it in check. "What's the description, officer?" "Black and breathing." Carter's face tightened, and he took a step closer. "Turn around. Hands on the wall." Kira complied, her movements slow, deliberate. She could hear the crowd in the distance, their voices rising as Ezekiel signaled them to move in. This was a moment that could change everything. But as Carter reached for his cuffs, a second car pulled up, and Bennett stepped out, his expression darker than the night itself. "Got yourself in trouble again, huh?" Bennett said, his voice laced with venom. "Let's see that badge now, kid." Kira's heart sank. They knew. Someone had leaked their plan, and now she was trapped. But as Bennett reached for her, Ezekiel's voice boomed from the darkness. "Touch her, and you'll answer to the FBI." The street erupted in chaos, cameras flashing, voices shouting, as the crowd closed in, their phones recording every second. Bennett froze, his hand hovering over Kira's arm, his eyes darting between her and the growing mob. Carter looked panicked, his radio crackling with orders he couldn't process. Kira seized the moment. "Officer Bennett, Officer Carter, you're being recorded. This is an official FBI operation. Stand down." The words hit like a thunderclap. Bennett's face drained of color, and Carter's hands fell to his sides. The crowd roared, their voices a tidal wave of defiance. Kira felt a surge of hope, but it was tempered by caution. They'd won this round, but the war was far from over. The street pulsed with raw energy, the crowd's voices a chorus of fury and hope as they pressed closer, their phone cameras capturing every moment. Kira Jackson stood tall, her FBI badge gleaming under the streetlights, her eyes locked on Officer Bennett. His face, once a mask of smug authority, now flickered with uncertainty, his hand frozen mid-reach. Officer Carter, younger and visibly shaken, stepped back, his radio dangling uselessly in his grip. Pastor Ezekiel Reed stood at Kira's side, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "You heard her, Bennett. Stand down. This ends now." Bennett's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to the crowd, then back to Kira. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed, his voice low but venomous. "Hiding behind a badge, stirring up trouble. You're playing a dangerous game, kid." Kira didn't flinch. "The only ones playing games are you and your department," she said, her voice steady, each word deliberate. "We've got evidence, dates, times, names. Stops like this one, targeting people who look like me. You're not protecting Willow Creek. You're tearing it apart." The crowd roared in agreement, their voices swelling like a wave. A woman near the front, her hair wrapped in a bright scarf, shouted, "Tell the truth, officer." A man in a worn jacket raised his phone higher, his face tight with resolve. Kira felt their support like a heartbeat, steady and strong, but she also felt the weight of what came next. This wasn't just about tonight. It was about every night, every stop, every life marked by suspicion in a town that claimed to be a community. Ezekiel raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Officer Bennett, Officer Carter," he said, his tone calm but unyielding, "you've got two choices. Walk away now, or face the consequences when this footage goes to the feds. Your call." Carter's eyes widened, his hands trembling as he looked to Bennett for guidance. But Bennett's gaze was fixed on Kira, his resentment palpable. "You're not untouchable," he muttered, stepping back toward his cruiser. "None of you are." As the officers retreated, the crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the quiet streets. Kira exhaled, her shoulders sagging as the adrenaline drained from her body. Ezekiel placed a hand on her arm, his voice soft. "You did good, Kira. Real good." But Kira wasn't ready to celebrate. She knew this was only a skirmish in a larger battle. Someone had tipped off the police, and that meant their investigation was compromised. She glanced at Ezekiel, her voice low. "We need to find the leak. If they know we're watching, they'll cover their tracks." Ezekiel nodded, his expression grim. "Agreed. But first, we get this footage to the FBI. Tonight was a win, but we're not done." The next few days were a blur of strategy and secrecy. Kira and Ezekiel holed up in the church's basement, their makeshift command center lit by a single flickering bulb. They reviewed the footage from the sting, frame by frame, cataloging every word, every gesture. The recordings were damning Bennett's aggressive posture, Carter's quick assumptions, the crowd's raw anger. But Kira knew it wasn't enough. They needed a smoking gun, something that tied the profiling directly to the department's leadership. Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. One of Ezekiel's volunteers, a quiet woman named Marla who worked as a dispatcher, slipped them a flash drive during Sunday service. "This is from the station," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously. "Internal memos. Shift logs. They're hiding something big." Kira's heart raced as she and Ezekiel plugged the drive into their laptop. The files were Goldman emails between senior officers, including Chief Harlan Tate, discussing high-risk neighborhoods, all of which were predominantly black. One memo, dated just weeks ago, instructed officers to increase presence in those areas, with a chilling note, focus on potential threats. Use discretion. It was code, Kira realized, for targeting anyone who fit the profile of suspicious, young, black, and unafraid to push back. "This is it," Kira said, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and dread. "This proves intent. They're not just reacting theory planning this." Ezekiel's face was a storm of emotions, anger, resolve, and a deep sadness. "Harlan's been chief for 20 years, he said. He's got this town in his pocket. Taking him down won't be easy." Kira leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Then we make it impossible for him to hide. We go public." The plan was bold, bordering on reckless. They would leak the memos to a local journalist, Sarah Nguyen, who'd been covering Willow Creek's tensions for years. Sarah had a reputation for fearlessness, and she'd already reached out to Ezekiel after hearing about the sting. But going public meant exposing Kira's role, risking her cover, and potentially her safety. She was ready, but Ezekiel hesitated, his protective instincts kicking in. "You're sure about this?" he asked, his voice heavy. "Once this is out, there's no going back. They'll come for you." Kira met his gaze, her voice steady. "Let them. I'm not hiding anymore." The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Sarah's article splashed across the front page of the Willow Creek Gazette, police chief linked to racial profiling scheme. The memos were quoted verbatim, their cold, bureaucratic language laid bare for the world to see. By noon, the story had gone viral, shared across social media with hashtags like Justice for Willow Creek and End Profiling. Protests erupted outside the police station, with Kira and Ezekiel at the forefront, flanked by hundreds of residents, black, white, young, old, all united in their demand for change. Chief Tate held a press conference that afternoon, his face ashen as he denied the allegations, calling the memos misinterpreted. But the footage from the sting, now circulating online, told a different story. Bennett and Carter were suspended pending an investigation, and the FBI announced it was launching a formal inquiry into the department. Kira's role as an FBI trainee was revealed, her face plastered across news outlets as the teenager who exposed a town's secrets. She hated the attention, but she embraced its power. For the first time, Willow Creek was listening. The backlash was swift. Kira received threats, anonymous calls, hateful messages scrawled on her locker at school. One night, a brick shattered the church's front window, a note taped to it reading, "You're next." Ezekiel tightened security, and the FBI assigned Kira a protective detail, but she refused to back down. "They're scared," she told Ezekiel, her voice fierce. "That means we're winning." The final confrontation came at a town hall meeting, packed to the brim with residents, reporters, and federal agents. Chief Tate stood at the podium, his hands gripping the edges as he faced a sea of angry faces. Kira and Ezekiel sat in the front row, their evidence laid out before them like a weapon. When Tate tried to deflect, claiming the department had made mistakes but was committed to reform, Kira stood, her voice cutting through the room. "Mistakes," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. "You targeted us. You made us feel like criminals in our own town. These aren't mistakes, theory choices. And we're holding you accountable." The room erupted in applause, but Kira wasn't done. She held up the flash drive, its contents now public knowledge. "This is proof. Not just of what you did, but of what you allowed. Step down, Chief. Or we'll make sure the whole world knows exactly who you are." Tate's face crumpled, his authority dissolving under the weight of the crowd's chants, "Resign. Resign." By the end of the night, he announced his retirement, effective immediately. The crowd cheered, but Kira felt no triumph, only a quiet resolve. This was a step, not a solution. The system was bigger than one man, and the fight was far from over. In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek began to heal. A new chief was appointed, a black woman with a track record of reform. Community forums sprang up, led by Ezekiel and Kira, where residents shared their stories and demanded change. Kira returned to her FBI training, her cover blown but her purpose clearer than ever. She wasn't just a teenager anymore, she was a voice, a symbol, a force. One evening, as she and Ezekiel sat on the church steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, he turned to her, his voice soft. "You changed this town, Kira. You gave people hope." She smiled, her eyes distant. "Hope's not enough. We need justice. And we're just getting started." The story of Willow Creek spread far beyond its borders, sparking debates about right and wrong, justice and prejudice, and the power of a community to stand together. What do you think? Where does the line between right and wrong blur, And how can we build a world where justice isn't just a dream but a reality?